I'm super proud to announce Interpreting Wine as the London Wine Fair's first ever official podcast media partner for 2022. Together, we're using audio to amplify the stories behind the wine fair, which can't be told in the same depth on any other channel. I will be on site during the in-person fair and would love to speak to regions and producers about how I can help amplify your unique stories using the channel. Just send me an email to hello@interpretingwine.com to schedule a meeting. I'm Lawrence Francis, host of Interpreting Wine, the place to learn from thought leaders in the world of wine and marketing, welcoming you to the London Wine Fair 40th Anniversary Special Series. Across these 2 episodes, I'll be exploring the state of affairs for the fair in the company of event director Hannah Tovey. In today's second and final episode, we look ahead to the 2022 edition of the fair, discovering why it's the most intelligent wine fair in the world. We look at the in-person fair from the 7th to the 9th of June, including which wine regions are displaying and where. Look at the discovery zone and the future-proofing of wine. The education zone highlights supporting younger wine professionals. The all-new no and low zone. We discuss the origins of the London Wine Fair and Interpreting Wine media partnership. The return of the Wine Writers Edit, and look ahead to the digital edition on the 20th and 21st of June. Enjoy. Super interesting to be back again with you here, Hannah. And if you haven't listened to the previous episode, that's really Hannah reflecting on essentially from fair in 2019 up until 2011. And I think what would be really interesting would be to, kind of take us inside really the period where you started planning for 2022. And it sounds, and as we ultimately see now as the fair approaches, a decision had to be made at some point to actually go back to your roots and to run the in-person fair, but not losing the adaptations and the innovations that came out of 2021.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what the conversation started with. Is digital really just something that is pandemic related? Do people want digital once they're able to come back into the real life and into real in-person events? And if we were to run a digital event, would it be it's almost like a vanity project? Is it necessary, I guess, is the big question. So we really did decide to sort of scale it back and look at what the benefits of it were and only continue with those rather than having a full 3-day digital event with 28 sessions and 25,000 samples. We sort of felt like much of that could go back into an in-person event, but that we would really like to isolate those efficiencies and those benefits and add them on to what is a sort of massive operation in and of itself already, to be back at Olympia, the home of London Wine Fair, opening those big doors and hopefully seeing that queue snaking around the building again, which we all look forward to. So we did identify that really one of the key things you can't recreate while wandering around is that algorithm. So we will continue with that dating concept of matching exhibitors and visitors, but in fact we've dialed it up and we've made it all the more clever because we didn't want it to be a functionality that was only available to people who engaged in the digital event. We wanted it to be a functionality that would support and assist the in-person event. So some of our exhibitors, I should explain really that if we wanted to be so flexible this year that we are making it possible for visitors to attend just the digital or just the live or both. And equally, we're allowing our exhibitors to exhibit in one, the other, or both. Now, that was a nice idea to have because we wanted to be supportive and flexible and kind. And we were aware that different parts of the world were in different pandemic stages, and thus being flexible allowed an exhibitor from Australia to exhibit in the way that they're capable of, the same as someone who might be just driving up from Kent and showcasing their English wine. So it was a very noble concept, but what I quickly unpacked was that it's a very difficult thing to do. And that's when we started engineering all the functionalities so that permitted all these different statuses for exhibitors and visitors. That's when we came up with the strapline of London Wine Fair 2022 being the most intelligent wine event of its kind, because we really wanted people to know that, in fact, it's not that simple to achieve, and we are achieving it. But it's been about working with platforms, again, like it was with digital, but platforms that haven't actually done what we're trying to achieve themselves either. So we are working with 2 separate platforms to enable all of those different statuses, and we are developing it in a way that I don't know of any other event that allows for a person to buy a certain ticket type and enter only the right kinds of parts of the digital sphere, and also then tap in contactless to London Wine Fair live. So it's sort of a sweeping statement in one way that these exhibitors and visitors can behave in all these different ways, but in fact it's quite a difficult thing, complex thing to manifest. So we've done it. We've got the platforms are working, and we know what that's going to look like. And much like the digital event for 2021, we're enabling video meetings and streaming of content like masterclasses or panel discussions over a couple of days. But we're also then running 80 sessions on site at Olympia with several hundred, I think it's 400, in the region of 400 exhibitors, and all the bells and whistles that go along with London Wine Fair Live. So to my mind, there is absolutely no rationale on this planet not to attend some part of London Wine Fair 2022. It is there for the taking in so many different formats. If it is too far for you, you can get a great amount of content out of the digital only event. But if it is on your doorstep, why not wander down and come and touch and feel it all again and taste it in person. So we do feel like we've made it incredibly available, and I think that's really exciting. But also, as an exhibitor and a visitor, you can not only, for instance, be matched as a digital exhibitor, you can be matched with a live, and you can book a meeting in person through the same platform. So it will direct you to whether this person is available to meet digitally or physically, and give you an option to take a choice on which you pick up on. So it's super clever, and I'm really excited to see it sort of roll out.
As you say, I mean, you're going to give us the exact dates and timings, really, about how really these 2 separate but linked events will really run, and I think will engage the audience. So I think, given that it's the first one that we're going to actually meet in terms of the timeline, I wonder if we could really switch the focus a little bit now and really talk about what's going to be happening at Olympia, back at Olympia, 7th to the 9th of June, and a sense of what have you got up your sleeve, and and how are you going to make this an attractive option for people to come along and attend.
Definitely. It hasn't been a normal year, and I think that in terms of building the fair and putting it together, and I think that's to be expected, partly because we really only sort of emerged out of furlough and the pandemic kind of more properly in September, and then I built my new team. So I'm working with an entirely new team, some of whom I've known for many, many years, but not necessarily worked with. So in many ways, it's not been a normal year, and I think that's produced some quite interesting differences about what the content is for London Wine Fair 2022 and who the exhibitors are. And one thing that's really surprised me is the number of new and emerging regions, for instance, who have booked pavilions and are bringing, their story and their wines to the fair for the first time. It surprises me only in that we're putting it together on a smaller timeline, and I perhaps might have expected that more for the following year. These things often, particularly for generic pavilions, they often have really long timelines. So really excited. We have a rather large pavilion from Uzbekistan. We have a large pavilion from India. We have Romania doubling the size of their pavilion, having had an incredibly successful 2019, the last live event, and wanting to bring more producers and do more masterclasses, which is great. We have Georgia doubling. We have a lovely big pavilion from Greece. Now that was quite a new thing in 2021, and now we're having a big central stand from them again for this year. And then perhaps less far-flung, but new content for us. We've got a beautiful pavilion coming in from Galicia. We've got a big stand from Murcia, so sort of some really nice Spanish content. One of the things I've been delighted about is welcoming back Wine Australia. That's a real thrill for me. I haven't had Wine Australia there generically in my tenure, so I can't wait to see that emerge. They are bringing over a huge number, I think, in the 20s of producers who are new to the UK. They'll be exhibiting up in the Wines and Earth zone because that's very logical. That's where importers who are looking for new wines will be, digging up the gold. So they're up there. Equally lovely big selections of wine from a region that I was less familiar with in Portugal, Setúbal. They're bringing a high number of producers and collectively together to meet the UK buyers. So I just think in terms of territories, and that's far from being an exhaustive list, I should say, that is just what I can think off the top of my head. Some of the more traditional regions are coming back that you would expect. We have a lovely stand from Côte du Rhône. We have a bigger French pavilion than 2021. So lots of gems in there. And then one of the positive outcomes that arrived from our date clash with certain large-scale exhibition in Düsseldorf was that it's when we were able to find the only last existing date in the Olympia calendar and move our event to June. Unfortunately, that meant we were clashing with the annual tasting of Bourgogne and Chablis. So doing the honourable thing before confirming dates, I rang them up and said, this is not something we'd like to do to you. We know how it feels to have your dates stamped on. And after a really marvellous conversation and with their sort of thanks for the transparency and the opportunity, we all decided, wouldn't it be marvellous if they were to host the tasting within the London Wine Fair? I couldn't be more thrilled. They're bringing some real energy to it. They're presenting it in the form of a kind of French marketplace style. They're bringing over 40 actual winemakers and a lot more actual lines than that, and in terms of different producers' wines, because there'll be a mixture of tables that you can go and meet the winemaker and taste, and a collection of free pour. Where they're bringing some Cremant de Bourgogne, they're bringing some they're doing a whole free pour Chablis tasting, and then a lovely press conference to make sure that everybody's up to date on what's happening in that region. La Grande Réunion kind of idea, everybody coming back in person. So I always like to talk about silver linings, but I think it really is true that, sometimes when difficult things happen, great things emerge. And I'm thrilled about that content for us and for everybody. So in terms of regions on offer, that is a huge march away from what we actually offered in 2019. I swear. So that, I would say, would be hopefully quite sort of positively bracing to people on arrival to realise that they've got that smorgasbord of really new and interesting territories to discover, plus some older ones that have been absent for a really long time. But a stand from Pro Chile, they've been missing for a couple of years. So I'm super excited about that broad depth and range of diversity of territories. And then we've got, on top of that, those are our sort of key exhibitors. We've got our zones that we create to kind of be relevant. The idea of any zone that we'll come up with the concept of is because we've thought about what does the wine industry need, what's helpful and useful. And we know that, for instance, the last few years of London Wine Fair, we can study the searches that our visitors make on the digital exhibitor list. And we know that they are hungry for British products. They are hungry for more English wine, Welsh wine. They enjoy the products across the range of spirits, beers and wines. So we still move forward with our Drinks Britannia zone because we know it's a huge pull. And while we've got Wine GB coming in with a lovely selection of producers under their umbrella, but we also have the fabulous bus from Light Timber. It wouldn't be London Wine Fair, I think, without that. And they don't just drive a bus in; they run these really rather marvelous masterclasses, on loop throughout the whole event. So that's a sort of lovely British element. It seems a shame to put on an event in central London that doesn't have a really strong focus on our homegrown talents and offerings. So that's the Drinks Britannia zone. We know how important our discovery zone is. We feel like if London Wine Fair does one thing well, and I think it does lots, but if it does the one thing the best, I'd say that our sessions in that zone are well beating. I think the idea is that we bring in experts who help us attempt to future-proof the wine industry and all of the idiosyncrasies that this industry kind of persists with. And while we do some things marvellously, and I'm hugely proud to be a part of it all for the last 22 years, there are other aspects that I think London Wine Fair is a great support on. We have our bi-weekly newsletter that we put out to the same effect, really, that it doesn't really just write about wine and what is wine. It really is more about how do we continue to grow and thrive as an industry? How do we look outside of our own navel gazing and our own obsessions with grape varieties and production techniques and soil and pests and whatever it might be, clones and how do we actually acknowledge that there are tons of other industries happening around us that massively affect what our successes might be, and that's technology, and that's marketing, and that's psychology and understanding consumers, and that's what the discovery zone is at London Wine Fair. It's all of those services, ideas, products, and things that support the future proofing of London Wine Fair. And happily, we've got a new headline sponsor for this year, because that's the kind of thing that makes all of this possible. And actually, it's a French product called Divine, looking to launch into the UK and using London Wine Fair as its launch pad. It's a wine preservation system, and they will be not only on site showing us the product and allowing us to learn about it, but they're putting on some really great sessions that are going to use real life examples of how that helps an industry be more sustainable and more profitable. And frankly, those are probably the two most important things for any type of business. So I do love the way that the circle appears to be completed in that zone. We touch on so many different things that without looking out, we're going to get left behind. We must look out at what else we can do and how can we do it better. So I guess an interesting, easy step from our discovery zone, because really one learns a lot in there, is to think about education as being a massive pillar of London Wine Fair. We've always thoroughly adopted it, embraced it, and wanted it to be a part of what we do. Really interesting discussions with the WSET team in my very early days here about some statistics that had come out that prove that the more we educate our industry, not just the individuals become smarter, but it actually improves the way we all operate and actually the financial returns of the industry as a whole. So we are fully on board with that, and we are delighted that once again the WSET are fully supporting us and headline sponsoring our education zone. And the reason we have that zone is because we're aware of the diversity of our audience. As I mentioned, I think on a former podcast, we have a young element who attend because they're looking to learn, grow, and level up, and they are potentially working in on-trade venues, or they're potentially working in multiple retail, and I fully support their aspiration to sort of stay in the industry. I think I was fresh out of university at my first ever London Wine Fair, and knowing how to approach it, it's a big old place, and knowing how to go about it, I feel we should be quite directional about the opportunities that are there, because if not, how can you have anything to say about the fact that a younger element might be roaming freely and indulging in too many samples, which has been a kind of a comment that reoccurs. So for the last few years, effectively and happily, we've actually been building schedules for those demographics that I described that enable them to attend sessions that are actually geared towards them. So, some of them even circle around the idea of how do I become an X or a Y? So we'll take a job title for the industry. And I'm really grateful of some of the companies that have worked with us on that. So some of the companies like Waitrose or Majestic, who are really minded towards levelling their own staff up, will help us share with us those that are attending, and we'll put to a sort of schedule out for them. So that's a big aspect of London Wine Fair that's changed quite dramatically over the years and has worked. We definitely, speaking to exhibitors, we hear from them that they have noticed a difference in that way. So that's good. Also, first time you actually asked me, and my wonderful meandering off, but you said what people might find different. We've launched for 2022 a no and low zone. It's like an expo within an expo. We're highly conscious that this is a category that's in enormous growth, and why not incorporate and learn from a category that's doing something so very well. Also, a lot of our exhibitors and visitors will continue to deal across both wine and no and low products. So it makes absolute sense, and we're thrilled about it. It's one part of it is hugely supported by the Club Soda Group. They are bringing in lots of their producer members, and they're also putting on some really strong content. I think it's 2 or 3 sessions they're actually running from the Discovery Zone. So it won't just be an opportunity to taste, but the sessions are really informing you how to work with the category to improve your own venue or shop. So how does it help your margins? How do you work with it? What is selling well? What are consumers looking for? So just really pure information on the trends and the opportunities. So that's no and low. And then we have a rather staggering range of sessions running out of our theatre, our masterclass theatres, where you can taste as well. So everything from Eastern European wonders, from an importer called Vida, connected with a producer, Kamal and Rakesh, Romania, right through to highly awarded Villa Maria, talking through their rather incredible wines, but with a sustainability angle on how they manage to be achieving what they are in that sphere. So, really huge range of sessions there that we're about to release. And then we have our industry briefings and some really exciting speakers this year. We always have a brilliant update from the WSTA because everybody wants to hear from our most important person. Is he still number one in the wine industry? I think so, Miles Beale. But he always has a huge audience, and there's a massive appetite for that annual update of where are we now? What do we need to know? What should we know? And what should we be doing? Very helpful. We all need a guiding hand. But equally this year, a new one, we've got a chap called Dr. Alistair Nesbitt, who has just spent the last 5 years doing this hugely intense, deep study on viticulture and the impact of climate change on viticulture. And the results have never been released. He's launching them essentially at the wine fair. So he's running a session on what his learnings are. And as far as I understand, it's possibly the leading and most deep research that we could benefit from there. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then maybe flying over to the other side of the slightly more fun, intriguing aspect, we've got Philip Schofield coming to talk about how you can make a strong celebrity tie-up, where we know there are endless celebrity wines out there, but what makes a good endorsement? Why would you do it, and how can it help? Apart from making money, are there other rationales? And he's very, very involved in the kind of sustainability angle. So he's very much involved with alternative packaging and understanding the impact right from the wine producer in the vineyard through to the wine when it's in the glass of the consumer. So he's actually going to give a talk on that. And I think that's what I love about London Wine Fair. You've got, from on the one hand, sort of leading doctors, research, through to celebrity wine brands and why do they matter. But each thing sort of deals with its own sphere, and there's just something for everybody.
Yeah. No, I'm astounded, I would say. Really, it's great to have the full picture, really, and to almost have everything mapped out. And there are so many things that are sort of exciting for me, and that I could ask about. And so many of those regions I've never had an Uzbek wine before. I've had precious little Romanian wine, and and even exploring, I think, wine Australia. I think it's still relatively underrepresented on the podcast, but actually, it's going to be starting to write itself in the next episode when I have one of the Australian producers who's going to be there. So it almost feels to me as though there is literally something for everyone. But I think also topics and terms like sustainability, I think, really fascinate me in their current journey, because I think, and celebrity wines as well, because I think they've maybe gone through the phase where it was maybe easy to just stand out by just using the term. And I think, being maybe, putting myself in the mind of the consumer, there is rightfully, I think in some cases, there's cynicism. If they see that people are greenwashing, if they're kind of just using that as a term, and it feels as though that education zone, and you say, inviting the celebrities who, maybe, we might have recalled from in the past, but no, let's bring them in. Let's have a conversation. Let's not have it as a soundbite and kind of tar everybody with the same brush. Let's actually have a full conversation about this. Let's share learning points, and I think that can really only be helpful for everybody.
Yeah, I would agree. I think London Wine Fair is meant to be comprehensive. It is about the entire industry, and celebrity wine brands are a large part of it. And they, and therefore, even if one might be a little cynical, it seems extraordinary just to ignore the phenomena, the phenomenon, I should say. Yeah, it's a part of our industry, and rather than just for the sake of it, sort of wave a flag, I think, as you say, engage, learn, find out, ask the questions. And there will be people within the industry for whom that's exciting to meet and ask, and good for them and good for me. And I just think that London Wine Fair is for everybody. So we wouldn't overlook any aspect of the wine industry, but we would always hope for it to be meaningful and useful.
This is all fascinating, and I know with 5 weeks to go, I'm sure you've got a load on, and it's a pleasure to kind of have you here to have this conversation. But one of the things that I kind of want to announce, and this potentially might get a little bit meta now, is actually to announce our conversations and our agreement really to position Interpreting Wine as the first ever media podcast partnership for the London Wine Fair, which I'm thrilled to be taking part in, and thrilled to help to amplify what you've got going on, and all of these great things that you've got going on. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind just maybe taking us back a little bit, and taking me back a little bit, really, just in terms of what was it about podcasting in general, audio, and I guess specifically Interpreting Wine, that you thought this is the right time, and this is the right partner to make that step into audio and into podcasting.
Absolutely. I think having done the podcast with you recorded the podcast with you in 2019, not least that it was an incredibly enjoyable experience. I think I mentioned, I have to say that. Thank you for that £20 note. It was a kind of revelation to me, just how... because up until that point, I hadn't been a podcast user particularly. I'm probably slightly the wrong age. I'm a little bit too old, or maybe a little bit too young for the other end of the spectrum. But I really wanted to talk to you about it further, for the fact that some of the information you shared with me about how people engage and how different it is when you use this media. You may multitask in a particular way, but it would tend to be in a physical way, that you might be driving or you might be washing up. But in terms of your sort of brain bandwidth, they don't tend to compete with other forms of media. Unlike me, and I'll do the dreadful thing of watching Netflix while scrolling Twitter. And I mean, absolutely abhorrent thing to do, because neither one is getting your full attention. And I love that idea that podcasts connect with people in that different way, that they tend to brain-wise solo focus on what they're hearing. And equally, I love the idea that you're capturing an audience that you might not capture through all the other routes that we use. I'd never undermine the other media that we work with, because we know it works, and that's why we continue those media relationships. But just even changing some of the wording that we use, the semantics, but the wine industry still often refers to the press more often than it refers to the media. And it made me realise that I was ready and actually really keen to sort of connect and engage with a broader sphere of media, and podcast but also just try and understand how younger individuals are connecting with different social media platforms, for instance. We've been doing quite a lot of research on that, talking to quite a lot of providers and looking at just studying the stats on how much content is absorbed through all sorts of different media and platforms. And I'm thrilled that we actually took the bold step forward with you to become official media partners. I think it's, mutually beneficial, as it should be. And I hope that by doing this podcast and by having you available at London Wine Fair to connect with both our visitors and our exhibitors, that they might sort of learn more about the category and get more involved, because I just think there's so much opportunity in there. And so, thank you for the connection. I think it's brilliant.
And I know, when we first started talking, you were keen to know my split of audience. And I think that the fact that I had a reasonably high, more than 70% trade audience, I think that seemed to, you're nodding, that seemed to stand out as a great synergy. And I think that we're both believers in really the opportunity for the trade. I know we have broadly in the wine trade we have an aversion to the word influencer, but I actually think it's a word to be to gravitate towards, because actually that is what I think we want people to do, that know about wine, that are passionate about wine. And maybe they do also know all of the the geeky technical details and all the clones and all the aging regime. But ultimately I think everybody benefits when there's new people being brought into wine, when there's interest being created at all ages and all sorts of demographics. And I think that if the experience in a live event can align with the experience of an audio event, and you can give people those interesting facts and give people that experience, I think it can give them really, that sense of enthusiasm that can go on, and it can just, be a real force multiplier and just touch that many more people out there in the real world.
Yeah, we did some really interesting, we developed a really interesting project on our digital event, actually, that we're carrying forward that sort of touches on that. We came up with the concept of the Wine Writers Edit. So one of the downsides of having thousands and thousands of wines in a single event is how do you choose what you do, what you taste, and where you go. Yeah. So the more kind of themes or trails that we can give people, or pointers, the better. And we approached 10 journalists who work in a range of ways. We were really specific that we didn't want them all to be traditional or all to be sort of influencers and modern, platform users, but a very broad spread across. And we gave them the keys to the exhibitor list early, if you like, so they could go into the digital space and search. And each of them were asked to pick out 3 wines from London Wine Fair. And they'll be doing this again for 2022, so I think it's worth mentioning. Yeah. They go in, they choose 3 wines that stand out for them as why would they run towards them and taste them? What is it about them? And then we ask them to share that with us and also with their own audiences. So it ticks a lot of boxes in that, of course, we just are fascinated to learn what their predilections are or why they're interested. It's great content to know why but equally them sharing that with their trade audiences and so on is brilliant multiplier effort on our behalf, but also fantastic for our exhibitors to know that 10 leading wine media professionals are trawling across their wines and researching essentially. So that for me was quite a sort of big step forward, and we're really happy to be doing it again. So just before the fair, we'll be releasing the 30 wines that make up the Wine Writers Edit. Mm-hmm. Another interesting way that we're helping our audience to essentially kind of filter all the wines that are London Wine Fair and make their own decisions about what they want to visit, but maybe allowing them some kind of trail or journey, is to work with the Old Vine Conference. So Sarah Abbott and her team there, and they are helping us identify all of the exhibitors who would fall into that criteria of producing their wines from old vines, and then that they're going to be acknowledged in our newspaper and through our social media, so that and on our exhibitor list, so that you can actually move around the fair in that way. So many projects and things happening. I often find it hard to know where to stop or where to focus, but those kind of things really excite me because I think they help us all work together and create really exciting projects and content. And I guess quite a fun recurring theme at 2022 is anniversaries, because this is our opportunity to finally celebrate 40 live editions of London Wine Fair. And some of our biggest exhibitors, rather excitingly, are celebrating their own anniversaries. So we get to do it all together and under the roof of the fair, which feels fun and engaging. And so we're welcoming back Notria for another year in their large space. And in that space, they do this sensational job of running relentless numbers of brilliant masterclasses that are completely oversubscribed. So they're actually running 12 this year of all of their icon producers. And it is a staggeringly cool session list, if you like. So do look it up. But they're celebrating their 50th anniversary this year and are going to do a few other activities on site to acknowledge and celebrate that. And then excitingly, we have Bibendum joining the Wine Fair back after several years of hiatus. This is the first in my tenure to welcome them in, and I'm delighted. And they're, like us, celebrating a 40th. So they're creating a sort of suite, an area that they can invite guests into to try out a range of their, leading producers, and also just get to know them and enjoy the space that they've provided there, because we know the fair can be quite frenetic. Yeah. So they're going along the lines of creating a kind of relaxed tasting space that people can join them in. So, lots of anniversaries to doff the cap to.
I've got to say, I am really looking forward now to the London Wine Fair, even more than I was before I arrived here this morning. And I'm also so happy that I'm able to share something that's going to appeal to really, my audience who are, largely outside of the UK. UK is still obviously a hugely important audience for myself, but the US is sort of neck and neck, and, I have listeners in many different countries around the world. So I think I'd like to invite you to close really with that look ahead to the digital fair, which, again, is that one which is building on 2021 and is also going to be open to those of my audience who aren't able to attend or who aren't in the UK.
I think this is another tremendous outcome from what might have been a rather dark time of the pandemic. Another tremendous outcome is this opportunity to be available to an international audience. Increasingly over the last 10 years, London Wine Fair has become in person, far more UK orientated, but never sort of intentionally, if you like. I think that the idea that an international audience would interact with us is incredibly exciting and something we would welcome and work towards. And we were able to do that with the digital event. You can, apart from mega time differences that are occasionally a bit stalling, you really can engage. And so again, by running both, that is a huge benefit of having this second wind. So we'll finish the London Wine Fair on the 9th in person. And then we've allowed ourselves a little over a week to consolidate some of the filming that will happen on site and review the content and make sure that all the highlights are picked up on and disseminated, sort of broadcast through the digital event. But it's really not just about that. We just feel like, because it's such a huge event, that even if you are there in person, you can't get to everything. There's so many awards ceremonies and things that you may be interested in, but you didn't get time to go to. So we're going to enable that concept of sort of sound bites from the most exciting bits and pull that into the digital. But we're also going to disseminate at least 60% new content in those 2 days. So it'll be the 20th and the 21st of June. We'll fill 2 full days of content, and that's a mixture of masterclasses and panel discussions and highlights from the fair. But then this rather important aspect of bringing people together through the profiles that they build, that algorithm running and matching them, and that opportunity to have the meetings and to stream the content. So we really do want to see that growth into the international world. We welcome it, and we hope that you can join us, because there's a huge amount going on at London Wine Fair, and there genuinely is something for everybody.
Once again, a huge thank you, Hannah, for your time. And I'm so glad you could carve out some time in your diary to very passionately tell us about what we can expect at London Wine Fair 2022. If you know someone who would enjoy this episode, then do please share the direct link, which is interpretingwine.com/470. See below for the London Wine Fair website, where you can register for the fair, join their mailing list, and follow their main social media handles. This brings the London Wine Fair 40th Anniversary Special Series to a close, and I, for one, can't wait for the in-person and digital editions to arrive. I'm going to be at the fair on all 3 days, so do please say hello if you see me around. And if you haven't already, do please subscribe wherever you're listening to be alerted when the next episode goes live. In the coming weeks, I'll be running 2 special London Wine Fair 2022 ticket giveaways for the wine trade. The giveaway includes tickets to the in-person fair and also the digital edition. So if you can't get along to Olympia for the in-person fair for any reason, I've got you covered. I'll be running one giveaway on Instagram and another on LinkedIn. So to hear more about them both, follow me at interpretingwine.com/Instagram and interpretingwine.com/LinkedIn, and turn on notifications so you don't miss all the details. See you then.